Spencer checked his watch and tapped the divorce decree. "Just sign it," he snapped. "The board is waiting." I stared at the strange waiver, then scrawled my signature to end the marriage he considered a burden. My phone buzzed the second the ink dried. While he adjusted his tie, convinced he was free to ascend, I read the notification. He had just unknowingly handed me a $150 billion empire. My name is Madison Kerrigan, though the man standing across from me had not called me anything other than a liability in months. I stood in the sterile light of the notary office, the divorce papers heavy in my hand. At 34 years old, I had expected many things from life, but finalizing the end of my marriage before my morning coffee was not one of them. Spencer Vale, my soon-to-be ex-husband, tapped his polished shoe against the floor. The rhythm was frantic, annoying. He checked his watch for the third time in under 60 seconds. "Sign it already. You are making this such a production," Spencer snapped, his voice tight with impatience. He smoothed the front of his expensive charcoal suit. His phone buzzed relentlessly against the mahogany table, vibrating with the urgency of a bomb countdown. He did not pick it up, but his eyes darted to the screen with a hunger I had never seen directed at me. "The board is waiting for me," he muttered, more to the air than to me. "After today, everything changes. After today, I finally rise." I looked down at the documents one last time. My eyes caught a strange line of text on the cover of the appendix, half hidden under a paperclip. Marital Waiver Crown Meridian Holdings. Trust? I frowned. We did not have a trust. We rented a 2-bedroom apartment in the city and leased our cars. I reached out to flip the page. Spencer's hand shot out. He snatched the folder away with a sharpness that made the notary blink. "Do not bother," he said, forcing a tight, condescending smile. "It is just internal company paperwork. Boring tax codes. You would not understand any of it. Maddie." I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had supported for 7 years, the man I had lived simply for so he could chase his corporate dreams, was looking at me like I was a stain on his perfectly pressed shirt. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of the coldness. "Fine," I whispered. I took the pen. I signed my name. Madison Kerrigan. I did not write Vale. I was done with that name. Spencer grabbed the pen the second I lifted it. He scribbled his signature so fast the ink barely had time to settle. He did not read a single line. He did not scan the clauses. He signed with the reckless speed of a man who thought he was escaping a burning building, unaware he was locking himself inside. The notary pressed her heavy seal onto the paper with a final, echoing thud. It sounded like a gavel sentencing us both. At that exact second, my phone vibrated in my clutch. I pulled it out, expecting a text from my sister. Instead, a singular notification lit up the glass screen. It was an email from a law firm I did not recognize. The subject line was bold and terrifyingly specific. "Notice of beneficial ownership transfer. Effective immediately." I stared at it. I blinked. Spencer glanced over my shoulder as he shoved his copy of the divorce decree into his briefcase. His eyes snagged on my screen. For a split second, his face spasmed. A flash of pure, unadulterated panic cracked his composure before he plastered that fake, charming mask back in place. "Put it away." "Maddie," he scoffed, laughing a little too breathlessly. "It is just spam. Probably another desperate advertisement. Ignore it." He did not wait for a response. He turned on his heel and marched out of the office, his stride long and purposeful. He looked like a man who had just won a lottery. I followed him out into the harsh sunlight of the street, clutching my phone. He was already 10 feet ahead, phone pressed to his ear, his voice carrying over the noise of the city traffic. He did not look back. He did not know I could hear him. "It is done." "Yes," he said into the receiver, his voice dripping with arrogance. "She signed. I am clean. No loose ends." I froze on the sidewalk. The wind whipped my hair across my face, but I did not brush it away. I watched him round the corner, disappearing into the crowd of people he so desperately wanted to rule. His final words floated back to me, sharp as a knife. Now, the real plan begins. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, but I did not turn the engine on. The silence of the parking garage felt heavy, pressing against my chest like a physical weight. Just 30 minutes ago, I had been a married woman. Now, I was a discarded accessory. My mind drifted back, unwillingly, to the beginning. I remembered the Spencer I fell in love with. He had been different then, or, at least, he had played the part of a decent man so well that I never saw the cracks. Back when I was an operations manager for that small, chaotic design studio in the city, we lived simply. We ordered takeout on Friday nights and laughed about our lack of furniture. He wore shirts he ironed himself and never once mentioned power or leverage. He told me he wanted a partner, not a trophy. That man died the day he walked through the glass doors of Crown Meridian. The change had been subtle at first, then exponential. It started with his vocabulary, words like network, high-value asset, and optics replaced dinner, weekend, and us. He began buying suits that cost more than my first car. He stopped looking at me with affection and started looking at me with assessment, as if calculating whether I fit the aesthetic of the executive suite he was clawing his way toward. I remembered the night I asked to see our joint savings account details. I had wanted to plan a vacation, a small getaway to save what we had left. He had slammed his laptop shut, his eyes cold and hard. "Stop prying. Maddie." "I handle the finances," he had said, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone he reserved for subordinates. "You do not need to worry your pretty head about the numbers. I take care of everything. Just trust me." Trust. That was the currency he had spent until he was bankrupt. For the last month, the pressure to divorce had become suffocating. He claimed it was for the image. He told me the board at Crown Meridian was old-fashioned, that they preferred a man who was solely married to his work for this next promotion. It sounded ridiculous, but he was relentless. He made me feel small, like I was the anchor dragging down his magnificent ship. And then there was his mother. My phone screen was still dark, but I could almost hear Vivian Vale's shrill voice from her call 2 nights ago. She had not called to ask how I was doing. She had called to ensure the transaction was completed. "Do not be difficult." "Madison," she had hissed into the receiver, not even bothering with a greeting. "He is on the verge of something massive. Do not ruin my son's future because you are clingy. Sign the papers and free him. It is the only decent thing you can do." I realized then that they did not want a separation. They wanted an erasure. They wanted Madison Kerrigan to vanish from the narrative exactly on schedule so Spencer Vale could step into his spotlight unblemished. A chill ran down my spine as I recalled a specific detail from the notary office, something my brain had registered but my heart had been too bruised to process until now. The date stamp on the document draft. Spencer had handed me the papers today, acting as if this was a sudden, necessary tearing of the bandage, but the date on the header was from 3 weeks ago. He had these papers drawn up while we were still sleeping in the same bed. He had planned this while I was still making his coffee in the morning. He had been waiting, patiently, for me to break down enough to sign voluntarily. And then there was that waiver. Marital Waiver Crown Meridian Holdings Trust. If this was just about splitting our meager personal assets and him wanting to look like an eligible bachelor for his bosses, why was there a specific waiver for a trust Spencer barely had a retirement fund, let alone a trust fund? And why was it named after the company he worked for? The suspicion began to burn through the fog of my sadness. He had been too eager. He had signed too fast. He had practically sprinted away from the table the moment my pen lifted from the page. I looked at the black screen of my phone again, thinking about the notification I had dismissed as spam. Notice of beneficial ownership transfer. What did you hide? Spencer, I whispered to the empty car. What exactly did I just sign away? I stared at the phone number embedded in the email signature. The name read Ellis Grant, Senior Partner, Trust and Estate Litigation. My hands were shaking, not from the cold of the parking garage, but from a vibrating instinct that told me the ground had shifted beneath my feet. I tapped the link. The line rang once. Ms. Kerrigan. A deep, gravelly voice answered before I could even introduce myself. He sounded like a man who billed by the second. I have been monitoring the docket. I assumed you would call. Who is this? I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the small cabin of my sedan. Is this some kind of sick joke? Because if Spencer put you up to this, Ms. Kerrigan, please listen. Ellis interrupted, his tone cutting through my panic with surgical precision. I need you to answer one question for me, and the accuracy of your answer will determine the trajectory of the next 48 hours of your life. Are you, as of this moment, legally untethered from Mr. Spencer Vale? The question hung in the air. I looked at the passenger seat where the copy of the decree sat. I just signed the divorce papers. I stammered. The notary stamped them. He took the originals. Has the waiver been executed? Ellis pressed. Yes. He made me sign it. He called it a marital waiver. I heard the distinct sound of a pen scratching against paper on the other end of the line. Then the activation clause is complete, Ellis said. The asset transfer has been triggered. What assets? I demanded, gripping the phone tighter. We rent our apartment. We lease our cars. There are no assets. Not marital assets. Ms. Kerrigan. Inherited ones. Ellis paused, letting the silence build. A direct blood relative of yours passed away 72 hours ago. He continued. Your maternal grandfather. I understand you were raised without knowledge of your biological father, and that your mother severed ties with her family decades ago due to a scandal she refused to discuss. However, biology does not care about estrangement. The lineage is confirmed. You are the sole surviving beneficiary of the Meridian line. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother had always told me we were alone in the world, that her past was a closed door. I never knocked. I never asked. I do not understand. I whispered. What does this have to do with the waiver? The Crown Meridian Holdings Trust controls the majority voting interest in the Crown Meridian Real Estate Group, Ellis said, his voice dropping an octave. We are talking about a portfolio that spans 3 continents, commercial skyscrapers, residential developments, industrial logistics hubs. The current independent valuation of the trust's holdings is approximately $150 billion. I laughed. It was a dry, hysterical sound. That is impossible, I said. Spencer works for Crown Meridian. He is a senior vice president. If I were related to the owners, he would know. He checks background references for fun. He does not know because the trust was blind, Ellis countered smoothly. And that brings us to the clause that your husband just helped us satisfy. The trust instrument contains a strict spousal exclusion provision. Your grandfather was paranoid about fortune hunters. He stipulated that control of the trust could only pass to a beneficiary who was unmarried or whose spouse had signed a full, irrevocable waiver of interest. My heart stopped. The air in the car felt suddenly thin. Check your email. Ms. Kerrigan, I have just sent you the secure packet. I pulled the phone away from my ear and refreshed the screen. A document loaded. It was a complex chart of shell companies and equity splits, but right at the top, in bold, undeniable letters, it read, Beneficial owner Madison Kerrigan. Until 10 minutes ago, Ellis said, his voice coming through the speakerphone now, you were ineligible to receive control. The trust was dormant, but by forcing you to sign that divorce decree and the accompanying waiver to clean up his image for the board, Mr. Vale effectively removed the only barrier standing between you and the empire he serves. I looked at the signature on the screen. It was real. The magnitude of the number $150 billion swam before my eyes. He did this. I breathed, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He did, Ellis confirmed. He was so desperate to climb the ladder that he did not realize he was handing the keys to the entire building to the woman he was trying to discard. I looked out the windshield. Spencer was probably in a cab right now, straightening his tie, preparing to walk into that boardroom and brag about how he had cut me loose. He thought he was free. He thought he had won. Ms. Kerrigan. Ellis said, "I have a car on its way to you. We have a lot of work to do." I lowered the phone. My hand was trembling, but not from fear anymore. Spencer had handed me the divorce papers as a weapon to destroy me. He had no idea he had just armed me with a nuclear bomb. I did not scream. I did not call Spencer to gloat. I did not drive back to the notary office to tear up the papers. Instead, I sat in a soundproof glass conference room 3 hours later, staring at a woman who looked like she could dismantle a person with a single sentence. Rhea Stanton, a financial security consultant Ellis had summoned, slid a black tablet across the mahogany table toward me. Her eyes were sharp, assessing me not as a client, but as a variable in a high-stakes equation. "We go dark," Rhea said, her voice low and uncompromising. "If Spencer or the current board finds out you are the beneficial owner before we secure the physical servers, they will panic. They will delete emails. They will shred hard copies. They will create a narrative that you are unstable. You need to be a ghost, Ms. Kerrigan, or better yet, you need to be exactly what Spencer thinks you are, a broken, discarded ex-wife. He thinks I am weak," I said, the anger simmering in my gut like acid. "Good," Ellis interjected, pacing the length of the room. "Let him believe it. Let him get comfortable." I took their advice. I played the part of the grieving divorcee with Oscar-worthy dedication. When Spencer finally deigned to answer my call later that afternoon, I made sure my voice trembled. I sniffled. I asked him vague, pathetic questions about how I was supposed to move on. "Spencer, I do not know how to pay the rent on the new place." I whined into the phone, hating every syllable. "Figure it out. Maddie, you wanted independence." Right. Spencer's voice was clipped, arrogant. He sounded like a man standing on top of the world. "I am busy closing the biggest deal of the quarter. Do not distract me with domestic trivia." He hung up. He was so confident, so assured of his victory that he had become sloppy. From the safety of the safe house Ellis had arranged, I began to watch him, not with binoculars, but with data. Rhea had mirrored his corporate calendar, a perk of being the owner, even if an unrecognized one. I saw the meetings he was taking. They were not with the main board. They were back-channel meetings, private dinners, late-night conference calls with encrypted lines. "He is rushing something," I murmured, studying the flow of documents Rhea projected onto the wall. "Look at the timestamps. He is trying to push a sale through before the fiscal quarter ends in 4 days. It was a liquidation of a massive portfolio of commercial warehouses in the Midwest, prime assets, and he was selling them for 60 cents on the dollar. Why would he undervalue them?" Ellis asked, frowning. "Unless he is incompetent." "He is not incompetent," I said, realizing the game. "He is greedy." I pulled the divorce decree out of my bag. I needed to see his handwriting again, to understand the mind of the man who had played me. I scanned the pages he had been so desperate for me to sign. My eyes landed on the confidentiality clause. It was standard boilerplate language, forbidding me from disparaging him or Crown Meridian. But then I saw it, buried in the appendix, under a section about exempted business entities, was a name I did not recognize: Obsidian Harbor Capital. It was listed as a privileged partner for information sharing. "Rhea," I said, pointing to the name. "Run this." Obsidian Harbor Capital. Rhea's fingers flew across her keyboard. Seconds later, a corporate registration file popped up on the screen. Registered in Delaware 3 months ago. Rhea read, her eyes narrowing. Principal agent, hidden behind a shell. But the secondary authorized signatory is listed as Derek Vale. I froze. Derek, that is his cousin, the one who failed the bar exam twice. The pieces clicked into place with a terrifying clarity. Spencer was not selling the assets to a legitimate buyer. He was selling them to himself, using his cousin as a front. He was gutting the company, my company, transferring billions of dollars of real estate into a private fund he controlled, all for a fraction of the cost. He did not want the divorce for his image. I said, my voice turning to ice, he needed me gone because he is about to commit grand larceny. If we were still married, I would have a claim on his assets. I would be a witness. He needed me legally severed and silenced so he could steal a fortune without looking back. I looked at the screen, where Spencer's digital avatar was currently scheduling a final closing meeting for tomorrow morning. He thinks he is clearing the deck, I said, standing up. But he just locked himself in the cage with the lion. Ellis led me into a soundproof room at the back of the firm, far away from the prying eyes of the associates in the lobby. The air in here was different. It was still and cold, smelling faintly of lemon polish and expensive leather. On the center of the heavy oak table lay 3 stacks of documents, each one thicker than the Bible my mother used to keep on her nightstand. Sit down, Ellis said, not unkindly, but with a firmness that demanded obedience. He did not offer me water. He did not offer me a tissue. He pointed to the documents. These are your weapons. Madison, this is the voting rights proxy. This is the board consent form. And this is the convening order for an emergency shareholder meeting. I stared at them. My hands were trembling in my lap. Just hours ago, my biggest worry was how I was going to afford a deposit on a studio apartment. Now, I was staring at the legal infrastructure of an empire. You are shaking, Ellis observed. He leaned over the table, capturing my gaze. Listen to me carefully. Spencer Vale expects you to be emotional. He expects a crying ex-wife who wants closure or alimony. If you walk into that building with tears, you lose. Do not fight him with emotion. Fight him with signature authority. Signature authority, I repeated, testing the weight of the words. Sign this one first, Ellis said, sliding a document titled Appointment of Interim Steward toward me. This grants you immediate unilateral access to all internal ledgers and physical premises. It bypasses the CEO. It bypasses the security protocols. It makes you the eyes of the trust. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. The metal was cool against my skin. I took a deep breath, thinking of the smirk on Spencer's face when he handed me the divorce decree. I pressed the nib to the paper. My hand shook on the first loop of the M. But by the time I finished Kerrigan, the line was straight and dark. I was not just signing a paper. I was signing a death warrant for his career. Rhea, who had been silent in the corner, stepped forward. She dropped a thin file on top of my signed appointment. You need to know exactly what you are walking into, Rhea said. This is the current key executive's compensation structure for Crown Meridian. I scanned the list. My finger stopped on a name that used to make me smile. Spencer Vale, Senior Vice President of Strategic Finance. But it was the line items next to his name that made my stomach turn over. Performance bonus trigger asset liquidation target. Q3, projected payout $25 million. I felt the bile rise in my throat. He is not just stealing the assets, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He is looting the company from the inside out. If he sells those warehouses to his cousin's shell company by Friday, he strips the company of its most valuable land, and the company pays him a $25 million bonus for doing it. He is betting with the system's blood, Ellis said grimly. He is cannibalizing the host. He is destroying the legacy my family built just to fund his new life, I said. The sadness was gone now, replaced by a cold, hard rage. He cannot know. Not yet. If he knows I am the owner, he will shred the documents. He will wipe the servers. So we go in quiet, Rhea said. We issue you a temporary credentials badge, legal name only. Madison Kerrigan, no veil. To the front desk, to the security guards. You are just an external auditor sent by the holding trust to verify compliance. Spencer is so arrogant he will never look at the visitor logs. He thinks Madison Kerrigan ceased to exist the moment you signed those divorce papers. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I walked to the glass reflection of the window. I did not look like a wife anymore. I looked like a storm front. Practice the line, Ellis said. If a guard stops you, if a secretary questions your presence, you need to say it like you own the concrete beneath their feet. I looked at my reflection. I pictured Spencer's face. I am not here to ask, I said. My voice wavered slightly. Again, Rhea commanded. Cold, bored, absolute. I breathed in. I let the identity of the scorned woman fall away. I am not here to ask, I said, and this time, the voice that came out was made of steel. I am here to inspect. The lobby of Crown Meridian headquarters smelled of white lilies and aggressively chilled air. It was a cathedral of glass and black marble, designed to make anyone earning less than 7 figures feel insignificant. I walked toward the security turnstiles, my heels clicking a sharp, lonely rhythm on the stone floor. For years, I had waited outside in the car while Spencer finished late meetings, too intimidated to come in. Today, I was not waiting. A security guard with a jawline carved from granite stepped into my path, his hand raised. Ma'am, I need to see a badge or a visitor pass, he said, his voice bored. We do not have you on the schedule. I did not apologize. I did not fumble. I pulled the appointment of interim steward document from my bag and held it up. The embossed seal of the trust, catching the light. I am not a visitor, I said. I am the audit. He took the paper, his eyes scanning the header. He stiffened. He looked at the signature, the wet ink of the trustee, and then back at me. The boredom vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine fear. He tapped his earpiece. Dispatch. I have a Code 0 authorization at the north desk, he murmured, his eyes never leaving my face. Escorting the steward to the executive level immediately. The elevator ride was silent and fast. When the doors opened on the 52nd floor, the hush of serious money wrapped around me. I walked past the reception desk where Spencer's assistant, a young woman named Chloe, was frantically typing. I am sorry. You cannot go back there, she squeaked, jumping up. Mr. Vale is in a closed-door session regarding the Midwest portfolio sale. He gave strict orders not to be disturbed by anyone. I am not anyone. Chloe, I said, walking past her without breaking stride. And he is not closing anything today. I turned left, away from his office, and swiped my temporary keycard into the secure server room. The light turned green, inside. The air was humming with the sound of cooling fans. I sat at the primary terminal, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I was not a hacker, but I had the master key. I logged in as administrator. I began pulling the raw data, cash flow reports, internal transfer requests, vendor contracts. It took me 10 minutes to find the smoking gun. It was buried under a file named Miscellaneous Consultant Retainers. There was a wire transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning. The amount was staggering, $18,500,000. The recipient was Obsidian Harbor Capital. The justification was listed simply as advisory fee for asset disposition. I clicked on the approval chain. The final digital signature, time-stamped 3 hours ago, belonged to Spencer Vale. He is paying himself a commission to sell my property at a loss, I whispered to the empty room. But it was the next file that made my blood run cold. It was an email chain between Spencer and his cousin, Derek. The subject line was Timeline Acceleration. I opened it. Spencer's message was short and frantic. We need to dump the assets by Friday. My sources in legal say the old man's trust is activating next week. There is going to be an ownership change. If we do not liquidate now, the new owners will freeze the portfolio for review. Sell it all. I need the cash out before the transition. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the air leave my lungs. He knew. He did not know it was me. He did not know his wife was the heir. But he knew the company was changing hands. He knew a new owner was coming, someone who would scrutinize the books. The divorce was not just about his image. It was a tactical maneuver. He needed to sever ties with me so he could execute this theft without a spouse asking questions, and he needed to do it fast so he could cash out before the new administration took over. He had looked me in the eye, told me he loved me but needed space, all while checking his watch against a heist timeline. I reached for the phone on the console and dialed the IT director's internal extension. "This is Madison Kerrigan, acting on behalf of the Crown Meridian Trust," I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "Initiate a full legal hold on all servers. Lock the system logs. Back up every single email sent or received by Spencer Vale in the last 6 months. And cut the external internet connection to the 41st floor conference room. Now." My phone rang at 7 in the evening. It was Spencer. I let it ring twice before answering, pitching my voice to sound tired and confused. Exactly the way he liked me. "Maddie, hi," he said. His voice was thick with a synthetic sweetness that made my skin crawl. "I was just sitting here, thinking about you. I wanted to make sure you are okay. The process today was intense. I am fine." "Spencer," I said, staring at the forensic accounting spreadsheet open on my laptop. "Why are you calling? I just wanted to check." He paused, and I could hear the nervousness bleeding through the line. "Did you happen to get any weird mail today, or any emails that seemed confusing? Sometimes the legal system sends out automated errors when a file is closed." He was fishing. He wanted to know if the beneficial ownership notice had landed, or if I had seen the audit alerts. "No," I lied smoothly. "Just spam." "Why, good. He breathed out. Then his tone shifted. The sweetness evaporated, replaced by a subtle, velvet-wrapped threat. "Listen, Maddie, people might try to contact you, competitors, lawyers. Do not talk to them. Do not let people use you against me. You are vulnerable right now, and I do not want to see you get hurt. I can take care of myself," I said, and hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID displayed Vivian Vale. "What were you doing at the building?" she demanded without preamble. Her voice was a shrill drill in my ear. "Security said a woman matching your description was seen near the elevators. I told you to stay away. Madison, you are a liability. Do not think you can come back here and beg for scraps just because you signed the papers." She thought I was there to plead for Spencer back. It was almost funny. I was not begging. "Vivian," I said calmly, "I was wondering something. What does Spencer need with $18 million in advisory fees paid to a shell company in Delaware?" There was a silence on the other end. It lasted exactly 1 heartbeat. "You have been looking at things you do not understand," Vivian hissed. "That is standard operating procedure. That is money to keep everyone in their seats. You think this world runs on good intentions. It runs on silence. And we paid for yours." I ended the call. She had just admitted it. It was not just Spencer. It was the whole family. They treated the company's treasury like a hush fund to bribe their way through life. I agreed to meet Spencer an hour later at a quiet, dimly lit jazz bar he used for his off-the-record meetings. He was already there, nursing a scotch. He looked frayed. His tie was loosened, and there was a manic energy in his eyes. "Maddie," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled it back. He flinched. "Look, I know how it looks. The divorce. The rush. But I did it for us. For our future. I need to secure my position so I can take care of you, even if we aren't married. I would never let you starve." He was still trying to play the benevolent king. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I slid it across the polished wood table. It was the transaction record advisory fees, plus Obsidian Harbor Capital, plus approval chain. Spencer looked down. He read the lines. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened and closed. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. This is confidential data. You hacked me. You criminal. I did not hack anything," I said, my voice steady. "I just read what was signed." He slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. The few other patrons looked over. "You do not know what you are doing," he snarled, the mask of the gentleman completely gone. "You think you can walk in here and threaten me. I built this. I made the deals. You are nothing without me. Maddie, you are just a... He stopped. He caught himself before he said the word, but I heard it anyway. Parasite. Nobody. Liability. "Go on," I said, leaning in. "Say it." He glared at me, his eyes full of a hateful, terrified recognition that he had underestimated me. "You do not understand Crown Meridian," he spat out, his voice shaking with rage. "You are just a simple girl I picked up from a studio. You are not built for this." "You are right, Spencer," I said, standing up as he stared at the damning paper. "I am not built for this. I own this." Back in the safe house, the air felt stale, heavy with the weight of too many secrets being unearthed at once. I was deep in the digitized archives of the Crown Meridian Legal Department, scrolling through files that had been scanned and forgotten decades ago. I was looking for the origin of the trust, but I found something far more personal. It was a document titled Settlement and Release of Claims, dated 26 years ago. I opened it. My breath hitched in my throat. It was an agreement between the Meridian estate and my mother, Calla Kerrigan. For years, I believed the story that my mother had left her family because she was a free spirit who rejected their stiff, corporate lifestyle. But the paper in front of me told a different, uglier story. It was a payoff. She had accepted $500,000 in exchange for waiving all parental rights and relocating to a different state, effectively disappearing from the narrative. "They paid her to leave," I whispered, my finger tracing her shaky signature on the screen. "They paid her to erase herself so the grandfather could pretend she never existed." But it was the signature on the witness line that made the room spin. Arthur Sterling. "Ellis," I said, my voice tight. "Who is Arthur Sterling Ellis?" looked up from his stack of files. He was the senior managing partner at the firm that handles the Vale Family Trust. Ellis said. "He retired 3 years ago." "Why?" "Because he witnessed my mother's exile," I said, pointing at the screen. "And he is also the man who introduced me to Spencer." The silence in the room was absolute. I remembered the mixer where I met Spencer. It was a charity event I had catered. Arthur Sterling had been there. He had tipped me $100, and then, minutes later, I had bumped into Spencer. I had thought it was fate. I had thought it was a romantic collision of stars. "It was not a coincidence," Ellis said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "They have been tracking the line of succession for years. They knew if the grandfather died without other heirs, the empire would revert to Calla's offspring. They needed someone on the inside to manage the asset, to manage you. Spencer was not just an ambitious employee," I said, feeling sick. He was a handler. He was planted. "And the divorce," Rhea added, looking up from her tablet with a grim expression. "It was not just about freeing him up for a promotion. Look at this." She projected a new document onto the wall. It was labeled Emergency Board Packet Confidential Draft. I scanned the text. It was a legal motion prepared for the court, dated 3 days ago. It was a petition for involuntary conservatorship. They are claiming you are mentally unstable. Rhea read, her voice flat. The motion cites severe emotional distress following a sudden divorce and lack of financial literacy. It asks the court to appoint a temporary guardian to manage the assets of the trust in your name. And let me guess, I said, a dry, bitter laugh escaping my lips. The proposed guardian is Spencer Vale. Yes, Rhea confirmed. He did not just want the money. He wanted the control. He wanted you to inherit the company so he could legally take charge of it as your conservator, claiming you were too broken to handle it yourself. They had built a cage for me before I even knew I had wings. They wanted a paper heir, a puppet they could trot out for signatures while Spencer sat in the CEO's chair, counting the billions. He thinks I am weak, I said, standing up. The sickness in my stomach was gone, replaced by a cold, burning clarity. He thinks I am the same girl who signed those papers in the notary office because I was afraid of making a scene. What do you want to do? Ms. Kerrigan Ellis asked. We can file a counter-motion. We can bury this in litigation for 10 years. No, I said. Litigation is quiet. Litigation is what they want. They thrive in the shadows. I looked at the server logs, at the evidence of the theft, the payoff, and the conspiracy. I am going to turn on the lights. I said, we are not going to sue him. We are going to publish the process. Every email, every transfer, every lie. I am going to let the data confess for him. I sent the digital summons for the emergency board meeting at exactly 6 o'clock in the morning. I did not sign it with my name. Instead, I used the official seal of the Crown Meridian Trust, invoking a dormant bylaw that allowed the beneficial owner to demand an immediate assembly of the directors. To the board members waking up to buzzing phones, I was a faceless, terrifying authority figure emerging from the ether. To Spencer, I was a glitch in the system he thought he controlled. By 7 o'clock, the red alert lights on my dashboard began to flash. Spencer was trying to force the sale of the Midwest assets through before the meeting began. He was bypassing standard approval queues, frantically trying to move the deeds into his shell company before the new oversight could intervene. Block it, I told Rhea. Legal hold initiated, she replied, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I am flagging the transaction for a potential conflict of interest. The bank will freeze the funds automatically. I tapped into the internal intercom system, listening to the chaos in the C-suite. Who authorized a hold? Marcus Spencer's voice roared through the speaker, cracking with strain. I need that wire to clear by noon. Get it on the phone and fix this incompetence. It is not IT. Spencer, Marcus Thorne, the acting CFO and Spencer's puppet, stammered. It is a trustee-level lock. Someone higher up than me stopped it. There is no one higher than me, Spencer shouted. It is her. It has to be Maddie. She is losing her mind. Listen to me, Marcus. When we go into that boardroom, you back me up. We tell them she is unstable. She is having a psychotic break because of the divorce and trying to sabotage the company for attention. He was building his entire defense on the premise of my insanity. It was predictable. While he scrambled to construct a narrative of my mental collapse, I was assembling the evidence that would end his career. I organized the data into a single, lethal digital packet, the wire transfer requests, the emails where he pressured the legal team to skip due diligence, the ownership records of Obsidian Harbor Capital showing his cousin's name. Then I found the loose thread that would strangle his support system. I was reviewing the travel logs of the board members when I noticed a discrepancy. Director Vance, the man who served as the neutral ethics officer, had taken a private jet to the Cayman Islands 3 weeks ago. The flight was paid for by a company called Black Sand Holdings. Rhea, I said, pointing at the screen. Cross-reference Black Sand Holdings with Spencer's shell company. Match found. Rhea said instantly. It is a subsidiary. Spencer flew the ethics officer to a resort on the company dime right before the vote, so the referee is on the payroll. I said cold, He bought the jury. I realized that walking into that room alone would be a mistake. If the board was compromised, they would bury the evidence to save themselves. I needed witnesses they could not bribe. I needed the people who owned the debt. I picked up the phone and dialed the lead partner at the external audit firm, and then the senior vice president of the bank that financed Crown Meridian's loans. "This is the office of the beneficial owner," I said when they answered. "I am inviting you to observe a board meeting at 9 o'clock. There will be a material disclosure regarding fraud and solvency. You should be there to protect your investment." By 8:45, Spencer was pacing the boardroom. I watched him on the security feed. He looked confident, practiced, ready to paint me as a hysterical woman who needed professional help. He adjusted his tie, rehearsing the lies that would cement his power. I waited until 8:59. I opened my email client and typed a single message addressed to the entire board of directors, carbon copying the auditors and the bank representatives who were currently walking through the lobby doors. "Subject attendance confirmation. I will appear. And today, I will speak the truth with original documents." I hit send. On the monitor, I saw every phone in the conference room light up simultaneously. Spencer looked down at his screen, and for the first time, he stopped pacing. He stared at the device, and then he looked at the double doors. I stood up, picked up the hard drive containing the death of his reputation, and walked toward the elevator. "Showtime," I whispered. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the boardroom just as Spencer was reaching the crescendo of his speech. He stood at the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by the board members, looking every inch the concerned executive. "She is emotionally compromised," Spencer said, his voice smooth and practiced. "The divorce has unmoored her. She is not capable of understanding the complexities of our current asset allocation. For the stability of the shareholders, I propose we place the voting shares under a special administrative hold, with myself acting as the primary steward until a permanent solution is found." I walked to the opposite end of the table. I did not apologize for being late. I dropped the thick file of forensic evidence onto the wood. The heavy thud echoed in the silence. "I agree we should discuss competency. Spencer," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a cold draft. "Let us start with your signature on these $18,500,000 advisory fees paid to a shell company owned by your cousin." Spencer stiffened. He looked at the board members who were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. "This is exactly what I mean," he said, pulling a folded document from his jacket pocket. "She is paranoid. I have a signed authorization letter from her right here. She agreed to the liquidation sale yesterday." He held up the paper, waving it like a flag of victory. I signaled to the tech specialist I had brought with me. The main projector screen behind Spencer flickered to life. It displayed the metadata of the document he was holding. "That document has a creation timestamp of 8:30 this morning." I said, "It was created on your assistant's laptop. The digital signature is a copy-paste forgery from our lease agreement. It is a fake, Spencer." "You have no standing here," Spencer snapped, his composure cracking. "You are a guest. You are an outsider." I looked at the representatives from the bank and the external auditors, who were watching the exchange with grim fascination. "I am not a guest," I said. "I am the beneficial owner of the Crown Meridian Trust." The room went deathly silent. It was the kind of silence that happens when all the oxygen is suddenly sucked out of a space. Spencer looked like he had been punched in the gut. He stared at me, his eyes wide with horror, realizing he was attacking the person who signed his paychecks. "That is impossible," he whispered. "The trust is... it is locked." "The divorce decree," I said, taking a step forward. "The waiver you forced me to sign. It satisfied the final spousal exclusion clause of the inheritance. By divorcing me, you removed the only barrier preventing the transfer. Thank you, Spencer, for helping me open the door." He looked around the room, sweat beading on his forehead. He tried to pivot, his voice taking on a desperate, pleading tone. "Maddie, baby, Listen, he stammered, holding his hands out. We are family. I did this for us. I was protecting the legacy. You know I love you. Stop, I said. We know you were planted. We know about the settlement with my mother. You were never my husband. You were just a handler waiting for a payout. I turned to the board and the bank representatives. Here is the choice. I said, you can terminate Spencer Vale for self-dealing and fraud effective immediately, or the bank will recall the entirety of the corporate loans due to a breach of the ethics covenant, and I will dissolve the board for negligence. Spencer slammed his fist on the table, his face turning a violent shade of red. I built this, he screamed, losing all control. She is nothing. She is a nobody. I just needed her to sign the papers to clear the path. I deserve this. Ellis, standing quietly by the door, held up his phone. The recording light was blinking red. That is an admission of fraudulent intent, Ellis announced. Recorded in compliance with state law. The chairman of the board did not hesitate. Motion to terminate Spencer Vale for cause, he said. Seconded, the ethics officer murmured, avoiding Spencer's gaze. Passed, the chairman said. Security, please escort Mr. Vale from the building. 2 guards moved in. Spencer looked at them, then back at me. He looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow realization of total defeat. As they took his arms, he twisted back to look at me one last time. Maddie, he choked out. I looked him in the eye. I felt nothing but a clean, sharp sense of closure. You signed the divorce to escape me, I said. You did not know you just signed to hand me the empire. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Do not forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people.